So we're completing our 2015 theme this morning of Sunday service. Does anyone remember what our theme's been this year? Even deeper it was. That's funny, because the second time I've heard that, and you still don't know who said it. So good, somebody got it. They win the prize. So it's been even deeper, and our intention in our Sunday services is to really focus in on having an even deeper experience of our lives in all areas, a deeper experience in our relationships, in our careers and way of being in the world, a deeper experience of life, a deeper experience of God in all that we do. And I began this series of talks the first Sunday of the year by sharing a quote from Franz Kafka, who's most well known for writing that story about the man who turned into a cockroach. If you may have had to read that in school. We'll do a sermon on that some other time. Kafka tells us that the truth is always an abyss. One must, as in a swimming pool, dare to dive from the quivering springboard of trivial everyday experience and sink into the depths, in order to later rise again, laughing and fighting for breath, to the now doubly illuminated surface of things. And I think that quote describes my life in many ways this year, trying to move into a deeper or greater abyss of truth when it comes to my relationships and my workings and work with this church and so on. But I like the analogy, and maybe you relate to it, of being in a swimming pool or being out in the ocean and kind of dipping under there for a little while and coming back up for air, and things are the same, but you see them kind of differently. Do you resonate with that? It's as if you kind of didn't give up your vision, but you gave up the way that you were seeing the world to say it anew again. And I think that Kafka's words of the abyss of truth makes it sound a little dark. You know, we like to use the term the invisible, that always, for every visible thing that we see in the world, there's a concording invisible aspect of it as well. And that the key to living life with depth, to living deeply, is being just as aware of the invisible aspects of our lives as we are of the visible aspects of our lives. And as we find that balance, we get to go even deeper. Hopefully not into obscurity or into darkness again, but into a way of living more whole, more healthy, more happy, and more in harmony with the overall arc of our life. Ernest Holmes, in our book of the month, A New Design for Living, says, "The world we live in is all that it appears to be, but it is also much more. There is the unseen cause, the intelligence or purpose in and through all things. When we have come to accept this idea that there is an unseen yet ultimate reality back of us in our world, that this reality is intelligent and conscious, that our mind or consciousness emanates from it, and as a result must partake of its nature, then we see that limitless, unrealized potentialities lie before us." You know, that's kind of the beginning of spirituality for me, to realize at some level that the limitless potentialities are all around us. And you know, do you believe that in your life, or even today, that you're surrounded by limitless potentialities? Does that sound too flowery? I think it's true, yeah. And you know, I invite you to think about, you know, that moment or those times in your life where your spirituality began. And for me, I think spirituality was always a part of my life, but it wasn't until, you know, I learned to take a book outside to a park and sit and read and start to look around me that I really began to see, for all that I saw, there was so much that I did not see. That for every reality or version of reality that I could notice, there were so many layers, not of unreality, but of depth that were there and available to me if I could just keep noticing, keep listening, continuing to open my heart to what is there. I could begin to touch a time and a space that transcended the tick-tock nature of the time all around me, to find a greater place in being. Do you have that moment? Can you remember that time where you began to develop a sense of an inner life? You know, to deal in a healthy way with that inner life is to continue to engage in it, to listen to it. To deny it is to build a secret life. It's to move or work into what we call the shadow, and to find some confusion in our everyday living. But as we continue to honor the invisible in our lives, we can begin to apply it to different areas, to what is most sacred and important to us in our lives. I love something that the theologian Howard Thurman said as well. He said, life moves at a deeper level than the objective and the data of our senses. We are most alive when we are brought face to face with the response of the deepest thing in us to the deepest thing in life. And that, for me, that's a great everyday intention. For the deepest thing in myself to brush up against the deepest thing in life, in someone else, in a situation, in a circumstance, in a moment. I know in my life I don't want a single day to go by where I am mindless or unconscious to that which is deepest to be known in life. Now, when we talk about realities of depth, when we talk about invisible reality, in our church we're usually talking in a mystical way about God, right? We're talking about being surrounded by divine presence all the time, and that's all really important, but in an even more pragmatic way, that invisible reality is really our consciousness about anything that we're engaging in. We have an invisible reality which is, for lack of a better term, perhaps our faith in our relationship, our faith in our way of being in the world, our faith about who we are in the world. These things are around us all the time. These are invisible realities that are feeding how we experience our life. And the stronger our faith in these, the greater the depth of our human experience. Yes or no? Do you know what I'm talking about? I can be confusing sometimes. One of the most significant things that happened in my life this year was getting engaged. It was a really exciting thing to happen. It was only 10 years after our first date that I started figuring it out. And I had the ring for a little while, and I knew that living in Seal Beach is an easy place to go get engaged because you have the beach right there. And so I knew some of the basics of what I wanted to do, but the when was a little hard because I wanted things to be nice. You want those things to be perfect, right? And so what I did know is that there was a Friday on the calendar, and that there wasn't going to be any time between the two of us for a couple months after that. So there was a little bit of a pressing time. And wanting to make it right, I knew that Gavin's grandmother was going to be there to take him, and so we'd have some time alone, and we would just walk out, and there'd be the sunset, and there'd be the ocean, and everything would be perfect, right? Well, none of it worked that way. So first of all, I had pneumonia. Gavin's grandmother, she didn't know what I was planning, but was a couple hours late. She got caught in traffic. When we walked out into the beach in the sand, it was absolutely freezing, especially having pneumonia, not a very good idea to be out there. There just happened to be a candlelight vigil for something tragic that had happened around, and so, God bless that, but maybe not the best thing that you want when you're about to propose. And then, the darn flash on the camera wouldn't work, and so on and so on. And everything on the outside was saying, no, there's something wrong here. But that's where our faith in that greater unseen reality comes in, because the truth is like I had said, over 10 years this has been building. For a long time, there was a lot of confidence to have in the relationship, to know that what we were doing was the right evolution. Now, her saying yes was a pretty important outward inflection to have in relationship to that event. But there was a faith there that understood that sometimes it's the imperfection of things that makes things special at times, doesn't it? But it reminds us how important our faith is in our relationship, not only with our partner, but with our kids, or with our parents, or with our loved ones around us, and how easy it is to get swayed away by the appearances. This is why that invisible reality is so important in our lives, that it's important to ask ourselves, what is my faith in my relationship? What is my faith in my career? What is my faith in my own mind, my own spirit, my own beliefs? What is my faith in God? And is it an airy-fairy kind of believing that says a potentiality in all things but lives the opposite way? Believing something that we even keep from ourselves because it's such a limited point of view that if we were to confront it, we'd be faced with some shame and self-repose? Or do we really live in that strong faith that knows a higher good for ourselves, for life, and for those around us? The book of the month, A New Design for Living, is all about creating a new design for living. And the authors remind us, they say, a new design for living needs to have a source, a pattern, before it can appear in our lives. The architect needs to have an idea before he can start using a pencil. It's a good metaphor for us moving into the new year, isn't it? To wonder, what is that idea that we're bringing into our relationships, into our work, into our day-to-day living? Is it big enough? Is it grand enough? Or is it ours at all? Are we living in accordance with something someone passed down to us? With some idea somebody on the far right or the far left has? With somebody that isn't ourselves? Or are we building and cultivating a greater idea for ourselves and our loved ones to live in? And it really is up to us. We all are born and live in the same world, but we live within countless ideas and understandings of that world, don't we? It's important to nurture and to cultivate our own. I love getting to be the minister because I kind of have to have faith by definition, don't I? Right, Dorothy? And I always remember in my job, the most important thing is caring about people. It's always about maintaining that. And so I'm very grateful that no matter what I'm doing, everyone in this church reminds me, even though I mess up pretty often, that it's about caring about people, dummy. And if you get caught up into thinking it's about accomplishing projects or what's on the to-do list, you've kind of got in the swing of appearances. Just like in relationships, when I leave a dirty plate in the sink and my wife-to-be looks at it and says, has the version of me being a slob, it takes a little while to get back to that faith to remember, oh, maybe he isn't a slob all the time, or whatever it may be. It's very important that we remember that our faith, the invisible reality about things, helps us to set a stage to live our lives in accordance with those grander ideas. I don't know about you, but I know in my life that the goal is to really be a presence. And perhaps you've heard that term used in work, that a company never really hires you for what you do, they hire you for who you are. Have you heard that before? You've got to take it with a grain of salt, but it's very meaningful too, because when we're just caught up in an identity or a title, or think of ourselves as just here to accomplish certain to-do lists, we forget the magic of just being who we are, being a presence and what we can do for someone around us, or what we can do, even though it's not on our job description, for someone who's in need of help. In Roger Teal's books, one of my favorite books that we studied this year, he reminded me of a story about the basketball player Maurice Cheeks, and something that he did about 10 years ago during an NBA playoff game between the Portland Trail Blazers and the Dallas Mavericks. If you're a Lakers fan, there's Nick Van Exel shows up in this too, which is cool. But there was a girl who won a prize to get to sing the national anthem at the game. And as opposed to telling you everything that happened, I'm just gonna show you.
And now to honor America and salute the men and women serving our country with our national anthem. Please welcome, as voted by you, the fans, our winner of the Toyota Get the Feeling of a Star promotion, Natalie Gilbert.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the stars out,
So they got the anthem sung, didn't they? That's a good thing. A couple things I really love about that video. There's the obvious one of not stepping out of your normal role to help someone that's around you. You notice he can't sing for a lick, and he shared later he didn't really know the words either. but he saw someone in need, saw someone in trouble, and knew his own presence and power enough to go out there with her. And if she was going to fail, he was going to fail with her. But you notice not only him starting to sing along and getting her going, but the whole crowd gaining in it too. And we can live in a sense of separateness sometimes, where we just watch each other mess up. And we stand and observe outside, sometimes with sweet words of fondness and compassion for them, but sometimes with words of criticism too. It's important to remember when we have that consciousness of a greater depth in life that we're all in this together. We can begin to apply that faith that we have in our relationships and in our families and the work that we do, and we can begin to apply it to our communities, our country, our world as well. Holmes tells us we cannot go to another for the creation of our new design for living. The ability to plan, to design, and to build is within ourselves. Every man will have to decide for himself whether what he is doing and thinking is constructive, life-giving, and contains the greatest good for himself and others. The proof of this is to be found in experience, evidenced in the design for living that has been created. As I was saying at the beginning of service, I think it's so important when we near what we honor humanly as the completion of the year, to take that time to really stop, take some deep breaths, and honor what has occurred. Not to run so quickly into the next year that we don't stop and celebrate what we accomplished this year. Sometimes, as I was saying, I look back and I say, what the hell happened? Everything went so quickly. And if you're like me, sometimes you're more apt to measure things based upon wins or losses. Am I doing better now than I was a year ago? And I don't support anybody in really doing that, because even looking at my life, when I look at some of the people that I've lost in my life this year, when I look at some of the money that I've spent or whatever it may be, I'm in some ways I'm down. There's not necessarily as much there. But when I learn to measure my life in the depth of connections that I've been able to cultivate, epiphanies that I've had along the way, of living more fully as being myself than I have the year before, then I can begin to see the richness and the gains that come in really honoring the path that's been. But I don't get to that point if I don't stop, if I don't take a breath and I don't celebrate the good that's been accomplished. As I was saying, there's something powerful about approaching our life too with a greater vision for the world around us. As we're moving into this next year, it's an election year, right? And I had the great opportunity of digging through some old church newsletter articles and finding some by Margaret Littoral, who was one of our practitioners. She would be 100 next year, but she just made it to 99. But she made her transition this last February. I read something beautiful that she wrote that speaks to this idea of having faith in a greater world around us, even when no one else seems to have it. She says, "I was with a group of people the other night who were discussing the events of our time. Before long, I realized that I was feeling more and more depressed. Listening to the group objectively, I found that there had not been a single topic discussed or a sentence uttered that had the remotest sound of optimism or hope or a positive solution to consider. Each one tried to outdo the others in his version of his own how awfuls." Was that anyone's Christmas dinner this year? "It is easy to join the crowd," she goes on, "and add to the flame of discount in our country. It is harder to risk being an odd one in the crowd and voice an optimistic viewpoint, and even more odd to want to talk about spiritual solutions to our problems. We can add to world peace. Every positive thought we have, every positive prayer we speak or think, lifts the race consciousness to a more harmonious level. We do make a difference. Negative thinking cannot control us when we direct our thoughts to the spirit of faith and trust in it, despite appearances." I'm reminded as well of what Emerson said about life. He said that life isn't about the length, it's about the depth. And I love that we all have the gift of life, but the gift of depth is something that we really have to earn, don't we? To earn to have a deeper experience of our loved ones, to realize greater understandings about our family members, our relationships, to expand upon just how significant our life is and the significance we make in the lives around us. Depth is the great gift of life that we have to earn through our practice, through our steadfastness, through creating a self-image that can begin to see ourselves as one with something that is indeed sacred. A final thought from Holmes: no one can tell you what your new design for living should be, nor should anyone attempt to. This is for you to plan. You are your own architect, but some of the plans you have drawn in the past may have resulted in some structures of experience which have not been altogether good. You are not going to be supplied with a new set of blueprints. Rather, you are going to find out how to be a better architect. So just taking a moment in closing, I invite us to actually stop, to take a deep breath, to take another deep breath, and honoring all that has been in this year, comprehending as much as we can in this moment. But let us appreciate it, in the grandness or in the thickness of it, in the beauty or even in the ugliness that we may have seen. Let us simply honor our own experience, whether it was good or bad. And let us take another breath, honoring all that is to come, knowing there will certainly be beauty as well as flaws, times of triumph and times of falling down. But let us simply, again, take a breath of wholeness. And perhaps we can touch upon one last time what our grandest idea of our life is for today and for the days to come. And remember these words from Roger Teal: we move an idea up the ladder of greater believing by taking it to the core of ourselves and actually becoming it. One more time: we move up an idea up the ladder of greater believing by taking it to the core of ourselves and actually becoming it. So becoming conscious of that grandest idea you have for your life, for your loved ones, for this world around you. Take it to the core of your being, and your charge is now to become it. And so it is. So thanks for your time, everyone, this morning. Happy New Year.